I wasn't going to comment on the Freddie Gray situation in Maryland, mostly because I didn't want to add my voice to what is often agenda peddling narratives and all of that sort of thing, what's obviously a very tense situation. But I feel compelled to comment basically on that itself. I watch some Fox News here and there because I'm interested to see what they say. It's interesting to me. And so, as many of you know, I watch O'Reilly from time to time. I actually like Megyn Kelly for the most part. And Sean Hannity's bonkers, I think. But I was really disappointed even in Megyn Kelly last night, because she was an attorney. She's a pretty smart lady, I think. And where a lot of them will criticize Barack Obama for being sort of on the wrong side of a lot of these issues. When some of these incidents happen and he comes out and makes statements that are sort of biased against the police or, something like that. And then it turns out that, there's no evidence of wrongdoing in very specific cases. They criticize him for peddling an agenda or pushing a narrative. And in some cases, they're right. That he's jumping to conclusions before the evidence is in, and it's irresponsible. He's using this bully pulpit to spread this narrative, and it's irresponsible of him to do so. The issue, of course, is that they're doing the same thing, and I think in some ways they have no less of a bully pulpit. I mean, of course, they reach fewer people, but they carry a good deal of responsibility to their viewers and society at large. And they're doing the exact same thing that they're accusing Barack Obama and the left-wing media of doing. They're pushing an agenda and they're peddling a narrative before all the facts are in, and it's irresponsible. It's unethical. It's unprofessional. So what I was observing last night was, and they have a tendency to, of course, side on the side of the police. They have a tendency to side on the side of with the exception of a left-wing president, the institution, the convention. That's their tendency. And sometimes, I think actually, I'll be honest, I think Bill O'Reilly has been a little bit more sensitive. I mean, a very little bit, but a little bit more sensitive to the side of the victims in this case, if they are in fact victims. But last night, Megyn Kelly started her broadcast saying something like shocking revelations that may change how you view this situation and may alter the defense that the police have for what occurred. Oh, well, that sounds pretty compelling. What is this shocking revelation? Well, the shocking revelation was that the other prisoner that was in the van, who was separated from Freddie Gray by a partition wall, he could not see him, reported hearing him banging against the wall or the insides of the van, and that he believed that Freddie Gray was attempting to injure himself. Well, that's interesting information. It's kind of witness testimony / hearsay in a way. I mean, not hearsay, but it's not eyewitness testimony. I think what he reported, the actual event, may be of some importance. What he believes is it's hard to know, right? What did they do? And I'm going to post the image. Hopefully it comes up here. I'll post the image that was running throughout Megyn Kelly's broadcast and throughout Sean Hannity's broadcast. New details in Gray's arrest. Washington Post. Gray tried to injure himself in van. Okay, so this was reported by the Washington Post. And so the report that the other prisoner in the van, who could not see Freddie Gray, believed that he may have been trying to injure himself, became Washington Post. Freddie Gray was trying to injure himself in a van. And that's highly irresponsible. Just unbelievably irresponsible. This is, I think, pushing a narrative without having all the facts in, and even the facts that they do have in, the fact that this prisoner reported that he believed that he was trying to hurt himself and that he heard him banging around in the van. is somehow all of a sudden a fact that this is what occurred. He was trying to injure him. I mean, the way things are phrased and language matters, especially when you're reporting something like this. And you know, this is for the same reason that I've kind of been on the bandwagon about the way we project ourselves when we're talking about morality, speaking in universal, absolute type terms, but then claiming that morality is subjective. That language is important. Otherwise, we don't communicate, right? And this is, I think this is deliberate. Somebody crafted this headline, and it's irresponsible. They don't know that he was trying to injure himself in the van. Sean Hannity at one point was talking to someone who was saying that the protesters are upset that that nobody was there. None of the major news media was really there reporting on the peaceful protests, the days leading up to the more violent protests. And Sean Hannity came out with exactly what you'd expect for him to say. That doesn't excuse the violence, et cetera, et cetera. Well, first of all, you know, he's completely disregarding the fact that those peaceful protesters are probably not the violent protesters. They're probably not all exactly the same people. Not to mention, you know, completely disregarding frustration and what it must be like to be in a group that at least views themselves as being, you know, oppressed by this police force. And then there was lots of talk, lots of conversations with Mark Furman and other retired police officers about what's done in these cases. And what struck me, and I haven't heard this talked about by many other people, and you'll forgive my ignorance on the question I'm about to ask. But what struck me was, it did not seem to me as though the police officers who have had this guy in the van were saying that they took care and consideration to, you know, properly stow this guy, i.e. a seatbelt. And so the question I have is there not a seatbelt law in Maryland? Like, I don't know. I'm asking the question. And if there is, well, I think the answer to all of this is pretty obvious, even if he was trying to harm himself. Because, of course, the police are tasked with being at least aware, keenly aware of mental illness. If they're not, then we got a serious problem there as well. Because many people try to hurt themselves, and if they're transporting a human being, regardless of the crimes committed or whatever, they are duty-bound to make sure that that person doesn't harm anyone else and doesn't harm themselves. And, you know, nobody seemed to be asking that question. Of course, again, we're talking Fox News, so there's a little bit of a bias, I think, towards the establishment and the police and that sort of thing. But to ask all these questions and not ask that question, was this guy not properly restrained in the vehicle? What if they had been in an accident on the way to the jail or the police station? Those are things they have to account for. And again, they do have to account for mental illness. They have no idea what any given person's status is in that regard. And I think it's just all obviously highly irresponsible. I'm not sure why they haven't released the autopsy, or they're not going to, apparently. That's troubling. That's not going to be good for public opinion on the street. It just you know, gives more fuel to the fire of people who are saying that you know, there's going to be a cover-up, that these cops are going to walk scot-free, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously we don't know. We don't know what the scenario is. But if the police are admitting or whatever that they did not belt this guy into the van, that's pretty damaging, I think, for them. But no hint of that, at least so far, that I've seen on Fox News. And that's obviously very troubling, very irresponsible reporting. And I just wanted to point that out, if nothing else. Thanks very much for watching.